Remember what Hank Paulson said during the 2008 financial crisis? He basically said, what is really important to U.S. stock markets is what people believe. People are going to look back, I believe, Sean, in 3-4 years and just bemoan the day that they didn't buy silver when it was this low.
Hey guys, welcome back. Thanks so much for pushing play. I have back on the line J.S. Kim. He is the founder and proprietor of SmartKnowledgeU. That's smartknowledgeu.com, and of course the YouTube channel of the very same name. J.S. Kim has agreed to join us here again after at least a year, I think is the last time we spoke. How are you, J.S.?
Yeah, I'm fine. It's been too long, so we should do this more often.
Yeah, we should do it more often because, I can't even keep up on a weekly basis, much less a daily basis. How much do you think's changed since the last time we spoke? I mean, there was no Brexit, had never even heard of the term Brexit, and now we have a successful Brexit. We think, I guess it's still up to the Parliament as to the final decision. I wonder if they'll try to steal democracy from the people. What do you make of Brexit, JS?
Yeah, actually, Brexit actually kind of shocked me because I thought there was a good chance that people would vote for it. But at first, I believed the probabilities it would pass would be very, very low just because I thought the vote would be fixed. But the one thing I didn't realize when I thought the vote could be fixed was I thought the vote was going to be electronic. And I didn't realize till later that all the votes were hand counted. So when you have a margin of victory, I believe it's about it was over 1.25 million votes. Voted to Brexit rather than to remain. More than 1.25 million votes was the margin. So when you have that kind of margin, I guess if you're hand counting the votes, you can't really fix the vote.
That's right. They can fix the vote in the United States because Diebold, previously I should say Diebold, now I believe it's called Voting Solutions or something like that. We'll have to look it up. It's well documented that they steal votes. Hacking Democracy, that great documentary, explains exactly how they do it. And it's well known that they can hack democracy using electronic voting. So I guess that does explain to some extent how the vote went the way it did in Great Britain because they hand count them. Let me ask you this. What is your view of the United States looking back? You're in Singapore, correct?
Correct.
What's your viewpoint on the United States and the dollar and all the craziness we see with Hillary Clinton still being named a front runner? She's got one foot in prison and the other foot in the White House, and the mainstream mockingbird media in this country seems perfectly fine with allowing her back in the White House. In fact, helping her get back in the White House. She just had a $100,000 per head fundraiser held for her by Lady Rothschild. What's your view of the craziness that you see looking back at this country?
I do look at it from a situation of the fact that people shouldn't be so bound to their birthplace, right? Because I was born in the U.S. So I think that people have to be more flexible in looking at possibly where they want to be long term, given the future outlook of a country. Because I still believe it's going to be quite a while before the U.S. comes out of recession. Now, the good thing as far as the currency is that, I do believe the U.S. dollar will be the last to go, because it is still the most widely held by central bankers all over the world, fiat currency. So, while we see currency collapse in Venezuela, Brazil, even our neighbor to the south, Mexican peso, has devalued tremendously. Our neighbor to the north, and the Canadian dollar, has devalued a lot over the past, 3, 4, 5 years. So, that's that one positive thing, is that the U.S. dollar will likely be the last to go. But, from a political standpoint, if people really don't agree and don't think that that they will be able to rise up like the people did with Brexit, perhaps if all of the voting for referendums and elections are still electronic, then the powers that be will fix votes and put, those that they want in power. So I guess that's one thing to consider.
Well, there is a rising tide of support for alternative candidates. I think most people at this point that are paying attention understand that the Clintons, for instance, are a criminal family, just as the Bushes are a criminal family. And both of those families report to the puppet masters at the top. Again, I mentioned the Rothschild fundraiser for Hillary Clinton that took place not long ago. There are puppet masters in control of really the planet at large, but certainly the United States specifically. And I think that they're starting to lose their grasp on power to the degree that people see them now, right? Whereas 20, 30, 40 years ago, people really couldn't put their finger on the Council on Foreign Relations. They couldn't point their fingers at the Rothschilds. These were hidden powers. But these powers are no longer hidden, are they?
No, and it's also thanks to podcasts like yourself, like the SGT report. I think that it's really been independent media because these types of things still aren't really discussed at all in mainstream media. So it's really been independent media that's been part of this awakening movement, which is great. So I just hope the internet stays free. That's something that we have to be worried about because certainly Google does censor a lot of its search results, and we see the trend of even Google now not necessarily being able to find the information you want. You use Google as a search engine.
Right. Well, it's interesting too because Bill Clinton just held a private meeting with Loretta Lynch as the FBI probes Hillary. And it just makes us realize here that it is the alt media that is sounding the alarm about the corruption within our own government. And, we don't really have a representative republic anymore. Maybe we never had it, JS, but we certainly don't have it anymore. We have oligarchs that run the show, the fraction of a fraction of 1%. And I guess as we segue away from the Clintons and their criminality and the political system in the United States, which is so corrupt, let's segue over to derivatives and the criminal banks. We're also seeing
Sure.
today that the world's most systemically dangerous bank has crashed back to its record lows, and we're talking about Deutsche Bank. Bill Holter and I really hold up Deutsche Bank as the symbol for the global derivatives Ponzi. It's really the poster boy for derivatives. How dangerous is it, in your opinion, that Deutsche Bank is crashing back to record lows given their derivatives book? And how do you think that will ultimately affect the derivatives Ponzi at large worldwide?
I think actually it's extremely, extremely dangerous. It could cause massive global financial chaos if Deutsche Bank goes belly up. I think also JP Morgan is, I think, the other bank that accounts for about 20% of the total global derivatives exposure. And, the thing is that the Bank for International Settlements just pulled an accounting trick. A lot of people don't actually even know this because I think at the height of the financial crisis that started like in 2008, and then I think around 2011, the amount of the notional derivatives was about 1.2 quadrillion. And then overnight, the Bank for International Settlements just cut it to 700 trillion just because of the way that they value those derivatives. So it was really just an accounting trick. So today, actually, I just looked up the Bank for International Settlements says that the total global amount, notional amount of derivatives stands just south of 500 trillion. But if you think about it, since they halved it, it's really still 1 quadrillion. So they really haven't addressed this problem at all since 2008. I mean, they really just reduced it from 1.2 quadrillion to 1 quadrillion today.
Oh, how interesting. I didn't know that. And you know what it reminds me of is this fractional reserve banking system where they just literally print ones and zeros into existence. I mean, the banks, you know this, JS, on any given day, you can't walk into any bank in probably the world, but certainly in the United States, and ask for silver or gold. They don't have it. And you know what else they don't have? If you walk in asking for $10,000 in cash out of your own account, you're going to get hassled because they don't want
Yeah.
that. They don't have that much money in the vault. I mean, they have 10,000, but they don't have endless amounts of fiat in the vault. They have a very finite amount on a daily basis because even the paper dollar Ponzi system is now fractional. So, when this banking system comes down, there's going to be a lot of people that you and I both know, friends, neighbors, and colleagues, that are going to be left scratching their heads asking themselves, what the hell happened?
Sure. And then just here's one other fact about the amount of derivatives that you may not know. So people say whether we want to call it 500 trillion or, like I said, because there's a counting trick applied, it's really 1 quadrillion trillion. I mean, 1 quadrillion of derivatives. That's the total global exposure today. 78% of them are tied to interest rates. Now people say, well, 1 quadrillion is a lot, but everyone knows derivatives are leveraged, so the true exposure is far less, it's a fraction of that. But here's the thing, Sean. The thing is that that notional amount becomes the real amount if these derivative contracts default. So people say, well, that's not really the true exposure. You can't say it's still 1 quadrillion, but it really is if the contracts default, because then that notional amount becomes the real amount that the bank is on the hook for. So, that is something that I'm glad you brought up because that's kind of been pushed to the wayside, this whole problem of the derivative game. And because 78% are tied to interest rates, that's really why the Fed's hands are tied too. And they've been, keep saying, oh, we're going to raise interest rates another 0.25%, because who knows what happens if they raise it another 0.5%. It could cause the derivative bomb to implode.
Well, flush that out for us just a little bit more because I talk about this a lot with Bill Holter, who has said in the past that derivatives are not a one-to-one sum game. It's much, much worse than that because if the losers can't pay the winners, then the winners are losers too. So we hear this a lot
Exactly.
in the mainstream media. We hear it's derivatives are not a problem because in every bet there's a winner and a loser, right? So it's a zero-sum game. Not true, is it?
Yeah, and they also say that the notional amount doesn't matter. They say you can't speak of the 1 quadrillion notional amount because derivatives are leveraged. So, you might have a bank that puts down 10,000 and the notional amount is 10 times more, say 100,000 for the contract. So they're saying, oh, the real exposure is only 10,000. But the problem is if there's one party that defaults on that contract, then someone's on the hook for that 100,000 because that's what it's for. So, that it really is a massive problem. And like I said, nearly 80% of derivatives contracts are tied to interest rates. So what happens? The central banks try to raise interest rates. I think that's what the Fed is truly scared of, is what's the impact, not on stock markets. Everyone's talking about stock markets, right? Will crash if they raise interest rates. I think they're truly scared of what happens to those massive amounts of global derivatives out there if they raise interest rates.
Right. All right. Well, what do you think is going on right now in the boardroom at Deutsche Bank and JP Morgan? I've often said that the scariest story, if you want to watch a real horror movie, try to get a little video camera inside the boardrooms of these banks, at the Treasury, at the Federal Reserve. Would love to be a fly on the wall to hear the panic that's going on behind the scenes. You say 78% of derivatives are tied to interest rates. The central bank's hands are tied. They can't raise rates. They want to go to negative interest rates. What do you think's going on behind the scenes in these boardrooms? Take us through a day at Deutsche Bank right now.
Well, it's just, pure speculation as on my part as it would be on your part.
Of
But
course.
basically, I think what they're trying to do is uh, just present a certain picture and a certain perspective so that people continue to have faith in the system. Because remember what, I don't know if you recall, Sean, but remember what Hank Paulson said during the 2008 financial crisis. He basically said that the reality really wasn't important. It was, I'm now paraphrasing here because I can't remember exactly what he said, but he said, what is really important to US stock markets is what people believe.
Yeah.
So, if they can continue to fool people, then things will continue to be okay for a while because it's only when people start learning the truth that they'll start withdrawing all their assets out of the global financial and global banking system, which I think should be done anyways.
Yeah. Well, let's stay on Deutsche Bank for just a minute more. You, of course, recall the news not too long ago of Deutsche Bank coming out and essentially admitting to silver and gold manipulation.
Sure.
So let's just flush that out. What role do you think precious metals plays in the global banking scheme? Clearly, gold's important. China wants it. Russia wants it. Nation states and central banks want it. But it's also important to these banks, isn't it? How important do you think precious metals is in physical form to these banks? Okay, we know they manipulate the metals through the paper markets, but how important is the physical, and how important do you think it is to know that Deutsche Bank admitted to rigging both gold and silver on the paper markets?
Well, I think the admission from Deutsche Bank is to address that part of the question first is truly important because there's still been a lot of naysayers out there in the gold and silver blogosphere that have been saying for years that all the people that said banker manipulation is suppression of gold and silver prices has been a huge conspiracy theory. Now we know it's basically a conspiracy fact with the Deutsche Bank admission. The second part of your question, remind me again.
The second part was just how important are precious metals to the banks themselves. I mean, there's
Oh,
this
okay.
undercurrent of a story that JP Morgan is hoarding physical silver. We know physical precious metals is real wealth. The banks know that too. How important do you think the physical metal is to these banks?
I think it's extremely important. And I think that basically, banks will continue to try to tell the public that gold and silver are no good, while realistically, they're likely accumulating. Like you said, JP Morgan is believed to accumulate a lot of physical silver at this point, because I think in the end, they know that that will be the asset that will have the most value to their future viability because we see fiat currencies crashing all across the world and we see a lot of other commodities crashing, but gold and silver continue to perform very, very strongly this year.
Yeah, and Peter Schiff has just said that silver has now confirmed the gold bull market. We've seen a big move this year in silver and a big move in gold. Do you think silver has confirmed the gold bull market? And how high do you think we're going to go this year in both silver and gold?
Yeah, I think definitely we're in a new bull market, but I like to say that we're really just in recovery phase because if you look at last year, Sean, the high for gold was about 1308, I believe, and then with Brexit, we blasted past that, but we're still only at around 13, 16, 17. And then silver actually hasn't, well, it actually just surpassed the highs of last year of 18.50 an ounce yesterday and today. So, this is just recovery from last year. So I think we are truly only in the initial stages of the next leg higher. So I think, even today, gold and silver is still highly, highly underpriced in US dollars. And in fact, I posted on my blog, which is at smartknowledgeu.com/blog, several charts if people want to check it out, because basically what I have shown is I've shown this current up leg and this current bull market since 2000 compared to the bull market between 1970 to 1980. Now, there's some very similar parallels between these two bull markets because let me just say real quickly, from 1970 to 1975, gold rose from $36 and change by 5.4 times to $194 in 1975. Then it corrected 45% to $103. And then most people know that it rose very quickly 8 times to a high of $800 in 1980 before that bull market was over. This bull started in 2001 at $250 and change roughly. And it rose 7.4 times to $1,900 in 2011. Now, interestingly enough, Sean, remember I told you that the gold bull took a rest in 1975, the 1970-1980 gold bull, and pulled back 45%. This pullback correction was 47% to 1050. And now we're on the way back up. So I think I would not be shocked at all. I don't know where it's going to go. I don't want to speculate where it's going to go at the end of this year. But I would say for this leg, I would not be shocked at all if it goes up at least 8 times as the second leg of the 1970 gold bull went up. So, we're talking 1900 to, 8 times, whatever that is. So I would say at least 8, 9, 10,000 is a definite possibility before this present gold bull run is over, because that's not even close to 8 times.
Right. You know what occurs to me as I'm hearing you say this?
Mm-hmm.
I think that if there was a bank holiday in the United States, which is certainly not out of the realm of possibility. I mean, the banks are not very healthy in this country. They were bailed out in 2008. They've just papered over the problems, with trillions. The banks have thrown trillions more into derivatives since. The banks are probably more unhealthy now than they were in 2008, 2009. We see what's going on with the derivatives with Deutsche Bank. If there were a banking holiday in this country, especially now that we know, JS, that China and Russia and other nation states are actively moving away from dollar settlement. They don't really want anything to do with the petrodollar.
Mm-hmm.
If there were a banking holiday, say a 3-day banking holiday, I think it's totally within the realm of possibility that people could leave work on a Friday and wake up on a Monday or Tuesday with an extra zero behind the price of gold and silver. It's just not out of the realm of possibility for them to devalue the dollar overnight, and we'd see real world prices reflected in silver and gold.
I don't think it's out of the wrong possibility. Actually, let me just correct one thing I said in the last statement, because this current gold corrected 47% to 1,050 at the end of last year. So 8 times that, like 8 times, yeah, the elevation from 103 to 800 for the 1970-1980 gold bull would be around $8,000. So yeah, I don't think 9, 10, 13,000 is out of the realm of possibility. The only thing I see as far as having a bank holiday and then having an extra zero on Monday. The only thing I see working against that is that from everything I've read about the Chinese bankers and how they speak about gold, they really want an orderly rise in gold. And I think the price setting power is going to keep shifting from west to east. And the Chinese don't want that kind of spectacular overnight rise, because that will wreak havoc in their economy as well. So I think they would much prefer a smoother ride, and a smoother ride could be $100. Sure, go $100 a day, but I don't really think that the Chinese will want $1,000 or $2,000 jumps overnight.
Right. You know, we did just see $100 move in one day, and that was after Brexit. I mean, the
Sure.
moves that we're
That's
describing are moves that are happening and will continue to happen as we see the ripples in this global economic Ponzi scheme as it comes apart. We're going to see these types of moves, and anyone paying attention right now to this interview is informed. Anybody watching CNN or CNBC is largely uninformed and has no idea the value, the real world value, the tangible value that is represented by physical silver. I mean, it's an
yeah, 18 because
extraordinary value, don't you
yeah,
think?
$18 is still a huge, huge bargain in my mind because people are going to look back, I believe, Sean, in 3, 4 years and just bemoan the day that they didn't buy silver when it was this low.
Yeah,
And
I've said the same thing. I mean, in fact, one of the first micro documentaries I ever made for my YouTube channel was called The Silver Perspective, and I made that, I think, when silver was around 18, 20, 21, on its run up to 48. And here, time has essentially rewound itself so that the sheeple people who might be waking up from this conversation now have the gift of entering a time machine and going back in time essentially and buying that $18 silver, because it wasn't long after I made that microdoc that silver was sitting in the 40s and it just appeared to only be going higher and that it was never going to go back. But of course now we know through the lens of perspective, 2020 perspective, that these criminal banks will do anything to try to stamp down physical gold and physical silver because, as you said, they need confidence in the system, and without confidence in the system collapses.
sure. And the one thing I would like to say to your listeners regarding that point is that I would say don't try to time a 5% discount in price in physical PMs or even in the gold and silver mining stocks, because if you have a solid correction, I would say take advantage of that price to buy because you never know what event will cause a big spike higher. Because at the end of the day, I'm sure people in Venezuela, right, where just in 2002 the exchange rate was 1.6 Venezuelan bolivars to $1. And I heard in April of this year, the black market was fetching 1,000 Venezuelan bolivars to $1.
Hmm.
So I'm sure that people that try to, save maybe $10, $20 an ounce of gold and were waiting and never got on board and then pulled away. That's not really what you want to do because you want to think long term. And we are in a global financial crisis, and we're starting to see a lot of those cracks rise to the surface now. So you never know because even with gold and silver mining stocks, like we were invested for my clients in the first quarter, and then we got out. And the second quarter, I kept waiting because I thought there would be a bigger correction that didn't really transpire. But then at the end of May, we got a 20% correction in the stocks, which is pretty good. But then all of a sudden, what do we have? We had the bad, horrible May U.S. jobs report, and then a big spike in the stocks again. So, you don't want to try to time that. That's the lesson I've learned. You don't want to really try to time things too finely because you want to think where gold and silver mining stocks going to be, where their price is going to be like a year down the road, 2 years down the road. Where's gold and silver, where their price is going to be in US dollars 2 or 3 years down the road. And if you have done your research, your homework, you're convinced it's going to be multiple times higher. Because like I said earlier in this interview, Sean, I believe we're just in the initial phases of this next leg higher. Then you don't really want to try to fine tune it too much. You just want to make sure you get on board.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, and here's why I agree. We are living through a once in a lifetime event. We're living through the death of a currency. We're living through the death of the world's reserve currency. The privilege of printing the money into thin air has been abused. It is continuing to be abused, and it will continue to be abused. There is no turning back. They cannot put the genie back in the bottle here. And physical precious metals ultimately will be the last beacon of liberty, financial liberty, for anybody who wants to protect themselves from what's happening to Venezuelans right now. So let's just leave people with that cautionary tale, JS. What's going on in Venezuela right now is not very different at all from what could happen in the United States, because even though we're quote-unquote a first world nation here in the U.S., there are many, many, many people, 45 million or more people on food stamps, and we just saw the EBT cards go down for 8 days recently, and people were losing it. People were freaking out. People were scared to death. Where's my money? Where's my food? I got to feed my babies. What's happening in Venezuela right now could easily be replicated by these bankers here whenever they want to pull the trigger.
Yeah, I agree, Sean. And here's the thing, too, because unfortunately, human psychology is such that people will see these events, they'll see what's going on with the Venezuelan Bolivar and say, well, not in my country or not here. And people say, well, that's an emerging market, not in an industrialized nation. But all we have to do is look at Canada, look at Australia. They've already had 20 to 30% devaluation in purchasing power. And aren't those industrialized modern countries? So, when we have consistent red flags all over the world, what other warnings do people need to, convert that fiat currency into the sound money of gold and silver?
Yeah, that's right. And juxtaposed against freedom and liberty are these bankers, these criminal bankers, these fascist bankers who say things like, all that really matters is the reality that we create. People just need to have confidence in our criminal system. Those of us listening to this broadcast do not have confidence in their criminal system. And JS, before we let you go, I just want to get your philosophy on SmartKnowledgeU. Tell people about it, how they can take advantage of learning from a guy as smart as you.
Well, thanks, Sean. I don't know if it's really just intelligence or just research. I've researched gold and silver and the sound money qualities of gold and silver for going on 15 years now, and day in, day out for 15 years, I've been looking at these markets. So they can come visit our website. We have tons and tons of free information. I have a blog that goes back to 2006, I believe, and so we have hundreds of free articles on my blog you can check out. We do have subscription services, which all the fact sheets are available on my site, which we tell people the best ways to buy gold and silver, the best mining stocks out there. So, basically the philosophy is that we will guide people to do what I am doing with my own money. So I really, truly believe this. And, the philosophy is also that we want real change here. So one of the missions is hopefully to return the world to the sound money of gold, because, what good is it if the few of us, because I still believe it's a small percentage, right, that actually own physical gold and silver, are fine while the rest of the economy collapses. We want a better world for, future generations. In order to have a better world, I believe we need to return to the sound money of gold and get rid of these fake, immoral fiat currencies that bankers have imposed upon us. So that is our philosophy in a nutshell.
Oh, and last thing, JS, before we lose you, tell people about your book, The Golden Gift.
Sure. Well, the Golden Gift basically just explores the history of gold as money. We basically debunk a lot of the banker myths that they use to denigrate gold, because we go through the golden period when gold was used as money in the U.S. was one of the strongest periods of sustainable organic economic growth in the history of the United States. So, and then we also debunk a lot of the myths where people say gold restricted economic growth, but it really was never a true gold standard. So we talk about what a true gold standard is, why Bretton Woods system was really an anti-gold standard, because a lot of people refer to Bretton Woods as the gold standard because gold was part of the system, but we go into that book and explain why it really was not. And so hopefully we alleviate a lot of the fears that people may have. Oh, if we turn to gold, will constrict the economy because there's a limited amount of gold, but we go through all those banker oppositions and we basically destroy them and show how gold could really, if we return to gold as sound money, how that could return the global economy to a new renaissance.
Well, that's what we need, a new renaissance for humanity, because the alternative is bankster chains. You can check out JS Kim at smartknowledgeu.com. And last shout out, you have a YouTube channel by the same name, true?
True. We have a YouTube channel by the same name. It's just go to youtube.com/smartknowledgeu. And one last thing, if I may just plug, Sean, before you let me go,
Sure.
is that I actually have one other product we're going to be launching, hopefully within the next 2 or 3 months, called the Smart Wealth Academy. And that also will explore a lot of topics that we explored in the Golden Gift, far more in depth. So that's more just like an online education course. So for anyone interested in that, just please come back and visit our website at smartknowledgeu.com, and we'll provide the details there of the new Smart Wealth Academy.
All right, very good. Guys, our guest has been JS Kim from smartknowledgeu.com. JS, thanks again for your time.
Okay, thanks a lot, Sean.
My pleasure. And guys, thank you so much for tuning in to SGT Report for your daily news and information, real news, truthful news, the antidote to corporate propaganda 24/7. And thanks for checking us out as well at thelibertymill.com. Have a wonderful weekend ahead, and a happy Independence Day in the United States. Happy 4th of July. Mark Dice did a video recently, again, showing that most Americans have no idea what they're celebrating on the 4th of July. I'll tell you what it was. It was us standing up against King George and taking control of our own independence, our own sovereignty, and our own liberty. We need to do it again. This time we need to throw off the banksters. God bless, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Have a wonderful weekend.